Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight, you are a New Yorker in March of 1888. You don't yet know that what seems like an ordinary Monday will soon vanish into white walls of snow. Before we step into the blizzard, do me one small favour. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. If you'd prefer these stories without ads, you can join the Patreon. It's linked in the description. And if you want the ultimate immersive experience, consider using a pair of wireless earbuds. They're comfortable, discreet, and designed so you can wear them even while sleeping. I've linked my favourite pair plus other sleep tools in the description. Now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. It is Monday, March 11th, 1888. You stir awake in your narrow bed to the creak of timbers and the faint clang of a streetcar bell somewhere down the line. For a moment you linger in the thin warmth of the blankets, weighing whether to rise at all. The room is colder than you expected, a grey light pressing through the window, as if the sun itself has grown weary. Your breath leaves faint clouds in the air, something you notice only after the first sigh. It is March, you remind yourself. The worst of winter should already be behind you, and yet the morning has the brittle edge of January. You push the covers aside and place your feet on the bare floorboards, which feel damp and icy against your skin. A shiver travels up your legs, and you shuffle toward the small stove that sputtered through the night on the last of its coal. The embers glow weakly, orange dots swimming in a bed of grey ash. You crouch down, stir them with a poker, and feed in a few pieces of kindling until the flames wake again, reluctant but obedient. The smell of scorched wood seeps into the room, sharp but familiar, a reminder that every household in the city is performing the same small ritual this morning. The street beyond your window is restless already. You can hear horses stamping on the cobblestones, iron shoes scraping, drivers shouting to one another. A cart rattles past, wheels jolting in their grooves, while from across the way, a shop shutter groans upward to welcome another working day. It sounds normal, almost comforting in its routine. These are the sounds that mark an ordinary Monday, and they draw you steadily back into the rhythm of life. The city is stirring, and you're expected to stir with it. You dress quickly, tugging on a shirt that still carries the faint musk of sweat and soap from the last wash. A stiff collar follows, then trousers that sag at the knees from repeated wear. The air bites enough that you reach for your heavier coat, a dark wool that has held back many a March wind before. The lining is thinning in places, but it is still the best you own. You button it to the top and test the pockets, reassuring yourself that gloves and handkerchief are there, small defences against the morning chill. In the kitchen, you set about a modest breakfast. Bread sliced and toasted over the stove, butter spread thinly because the supply is low. A mug of coffee, bitter from yesterday's grounds, stretched one day further than intended. You eat without hurry, but also without pleasure. More a matter of fueling the body than indulging it. The bread is dry, the butter faint, the coffee tepid. Still, it fills the stomach, and when you set the mug down, you feel steadier, more prepared to face the world beyond the door. Before leaving, you pause at the window. The glass is fogged slightly on the inside, moisture curling in pale streaks. Beyond it, the sky hangs heavy, a dull and formless grey that threatens but does not yet deliver. You watch a cluster of schoolchildren dart along the pavement, scarves trailing, voices bright in the morning air. Their laughter cuts through the general murmur of the street, and for a moment it seems to chase away the gloom. You think nothing of the sky, nothing of the chill. March is fickle, and a cold morning is not enough to alter your plans. You pull your boots on by the door, leather stiff with the residue of snow and salt from the weeks past. The laces resist, your fingers clumsy in the cold, but at last they tighten enough to hold. You set your hat firmly on your head, the brim low, and check once more that your gloves are secure. A final glance around the room shows everything in its place. Fire burning, table cleared, window latched. You are ready. The door opens with a push, reluctant against the swelling of damp wood. The moment you step outside, the city envelops you. Horses clatter, their breath puffing in plumes that drift and vanish. Streetcars clang down their lines, sparks bright against the gloom. Men stride quickly, collars up, newspapers tucked under arms. Women guide children towards schools or errands, skirts lifted just above the cobbles to avoid the lingering puddles. Vendors call in the distance, hawking produce and bread, voices strained by the crisp air. It is noisy, alive, bustling. The same city you left yesterday, unchanged, reassuring. The cold is immediate, but not unbearable. It gnaws gently at your cheeks, seeps through the seams of your gloves, stiffens the tips of your ears. You pull your coat tighter, shoulders hunched, but otherwise, think little of it. New York has endured worse, and so have you. The weather is not yet remarkable, merely another obstacle to endure until the true spring arrives. There is even a clarity to the air that feels bracing, a kind of sharpened edge that wakes the body from its winter stupor. You walk with purpose, boots striking the cobblestones, breath rising in rhythm with each step. Around you, the city seems intent on proving its resilience. Shutters fly upward, shops open their doors, carts unload goods from warehouses along the river. The world has work to do, and no grey sky or chill breeze will halt it. There is comfort in that momentum, in the sense that the city itself cannot be stopped. If anything, the bustle makes you feel almost foolish for noticing the cold at all. You join the current of the city, boots striking in time with dozens of others moving along the same cobbled stretch. The sound is a kind of living drum beat. Iron shoes against stone, the scrape of cartwheels, the creak of harnesses, all woven together with the sharp voices of drivers urging their horses onward. The air is already thick with smoke curling from chimneys, each thin column drawn sideways by the restless wind. It stings your nostrils faintly, carrying with it the mixed scents of coal, damp wood, and the sour tang of manure left to harden in the cracks of the street. None of it surprises you. These are the notes of a morning symphony that has played without pause for as long as you can remember. Shops open in quick succession, shutters groan upward, and doors bang wide, releasing a rush of warmer air, scented faintly with bread, coffee, or spice. Grocers roll barrels toward the pavement, thumping them into place with practiced rhythm. A butcher across the way hangs cuts of meat in his window, his apron already smeared with the morning's labour. The clatter of his cleaver carries into the street, a steady percussion that joins the chorus of activity. Tailors tug mannequins into view, their stiff figures draped with coats that swing loosely in the breeze. You catch a snatch of conversation here and there, a man bargaining over oranges, a woman demanding fresh eggs, a boy arguing that his penny is good enough for a roll. The city is alive in every direction, breathing through the thousands of small exchanges that define its mornings. School children weave between the adults, their voices sharper, brighter, cutting through the murmur. Scarves trail like banners, boots slap against the stones, and their laughter rises above the lower pitch of commerce and complaint. They dart around carriages with careless ease, while mothers and fathers shout after them with half-hearted scolds, too burdened with baskets or errands to do more than call. You watch one boy skip past, cheeks flushed red from the cold, a book satchel bouncing against his side. He disappears quickly into the crowd, swallowed as though the street itself consumes him. Despite the energy, there is an edge beneath it all. The air has a sharper bite than it should, a dampness that clings to your skin even as you walk briskly. People notice it, though most try not to show it. A woman passing with a bundle pulls her shawl tighter, casting a glance skyward as if to measure the colour of the clouds. A cab driver mutters to his passenger about the wind, shaking his head with the solemn weight of one who has endured many winters. Two men at the corner pause their conversation just long enough to share a remark about the weather, one gesturing vaguely at the sky before they return to the business of gossip. Everyone acknowledges the change in the air, but no one slows their step. You feel it yourself, that peculiar stillness that does not belong to the usual morning bustle. For all the noise, for all the shouting and hammering and laughter, there is something in the atmosphere that presses quieter than sound. The clouds above seem heavier now than when you first left the house, low enough that they almost scrape the tops of the taller buildings. They flatten the light, washing the street in a dim grey that makes every colour look muted. Red bricks appear duller, painted shop fronts more tired, the faces around you pale and flat. You keep moving, though you sense that the day has already begun to tilt away from its routine. The horses seem to feel it as well. Some toss their heads and stamp harder than usual, ears twitching as though they can hear something the humans cannot. A wagon rattles unevenly as its team lurches forward, the driver jerking hard at the reins with a curse. Another horse snorts loudly, steam gushing from its nostrils in a burst that hangs thick in the air before dissolving. Even the animals seem unsettled, though the work goes on because it must. No one stops. No one dares admit that a shift in the air could matter when there are deliveries to make, customers to serve, meals to prepare. You turn down a narrower street and feel the draft sharpen between the buildings. The wind knifes through the gap, carrying grit that stings your cheek. A newspaper page tumbles along the stones, its headlines smudged and unreadable before it slaps against a post and sticks there, fluttering weakly. An old man stoops to peel it away, but the wind snatches it back and hurls it further down the lane. He lets it go with a shrug, drawing his coat closer, muttering as he shuffles on. A group of apprentices pass in the opposite direction, shoulders hunched, collars high, their laughter muted compared to the children earlier. They notice you watching and nod curtly, eyes narrowed against the cold. The smell of coal smoke thickens as you approach an intersection where a dozen chimneys cluster close together. The haze drifts low, mixing with the damp air, coating your tongue with a sour metallic taste. The wind toys with it, tearing it into strips, but never carrying it entirely away. You cough once, glove raised to your mouth, and push through it, eager to return to clearer air. Ahead, a streetcar screeches on its rails. It groans as it slows, passengers jostling inside, then clangs again as it lurches forward, swallowed by the mist and smoke, before you can trace its route. As you continue, you catch fragments of conversation that reveal the same unease you feel but dare not name. Strange for March, one voice says. Colder than it should be. Another mutters about aching bones. The kind of ache that predicts a storm better than any newspaper forecast. A woman warns her companion to hurry before the weather turns, though she laughs as she says it, brushing her concern aside. No one quite believes that a true storm could come. Not here, not now. March brings rain, perhaps a flurry or two, but the city has endured far worse in its past. The faith is not in the sky, but in the city itself, as though the sheer momentum of New York can outpace anything the heavens send down. You shake your head at the thought, adjusting your coat against the persistent draft. It is colder now than when you first left, though the difference is subtle enough that it could be imagination. You glance upward again, half expecting to see the sun fight its way through, but the clouds are denser, darker, knitted together in a seamless lid. There is no light breaking through, only a diffuse glow that makes it impossible to judge the hour. You know it must still be morning, but the sky has the weight of evening. Still the city does not pause. Wagons rattle, drivers shout, bells clang, hammers ring. The great machine of the streets keeps turning, oblivious to the change in air. You are swept along with it, step after step, until you hardly notice the gradual slowing of the crowd around you. It happens all at once and not at all, a collective shift of attention as heads begin to tilt upward. A boy stops laughing mid-stride, his eyes fixed on the sky. Grocer wipes his hands on his apron and leans out of his doorway, squinting. A driver reins in his team, just long enough to glance upward, before clicking his tongue and urging them forward again. You follow their gaze and see it. Small pale flakes drifting down from the grey above. They settle on your hat, your coat, melting as quickly as they land. Harmless, almost decorative, like the final gesture of winter bowing out before spring. The first flakes seem almost charming. They drift lazily from the grey lid of sky, pale specks tumbling and dissolving on the pavement before anyone has time to notice them. Children tilt their faces upward, mouths open, laughing as the flakes vanish on their tongues. Women brush them from bonnets with quick gloved hands, irritated more by the damp spots than by the snow itself. The men barely pause, shoulders bent against the breeze, eyes fixed on their errands. You watch the flakes catch in hair and hats, melting as soon as they land, so harmless that they might as well be dust. At first there is no reason to think the snow will last. March often plays such tricks, sending out a brief flurry to remind the city that winter is not quite done before retreating into rain or sun. People take it as an inconvenience, nothing more. The grocer continues to weigh apples on his counter. The schoolmaster shepherds his pupils across the street, and a vendor still cries out the price of his rolls as if the sky were clear. You follow their example, brushing a few flakes from your coat sleeve and continuing at your usual pace. The day feels as though it will remain ordinary, if a little colder than you'd prefer. But the sky has other plans. Within minutes, the delicate drift becomes a steadier fall, the flakes fatter, wetter, striking the stones hard enough to linger in seams and gutters. The air feels heavier, a damp weight that settles on your shoulders, making the coat cling tighter against your back. A woman hurries past with her parcels tucked under one arm, her other hand gripping her shawl at her throat. She mutters to herself about the weather, scowling as though the snow were a personal insult. You step aside to avoid a delivery wagon as it rattles hurriedly down the street, the driver snapping his whip with more urgency than before. The flakes grow more aggressive. They no longer drift but sweep sideways, hurled on sudden gusts that sting your cheeks and redden your nose. You taste them when you open your mouth to breathe, cold moisture settling at the back of your throat. It is still daylight, but the sky seems to dim with each passing moment, the clouds sinking lower, the air thickening until the outlines of buildings blur at their edges. What had been a harmless flurry begins to resemble something more insistent, more determined, though the crowd presses on stubbornly, as if willpower alone can force the day to remain ordinary. You begin to notice small shifts in the routine. A shopkeeper, who only moments ago stood chatting with a neighbour, now fumbles to lower his shutters again, muttering that there will be no customers in such weather. Another runs outside to snatch goods back from the street, his crates rattling as he drags them into shelter. The clatter of hooves grows sharper, echoing louder as drivers strike their teams to make faster time. Carts that once lingered now turn at the nearest corner, drivers squinting through the thickening curtain of snow. You catch the anxious glance of a man trying to hail a cab, his hand raised high, his voice cracking as he shouts against the wind. The driver slows, considers, then shakes his head and urges his horse onward, unwilling to take on another passenger. The change is gradual but unmistakable. People move more quickly, shoulders hunched, hats pulled low. Scarves wind tighter around mouths and noses, muffling voices until the street sounds like it is speaking through cloth. The cheer of school children fades, their games abandoned as teachers and parents hurry them along with sharper commands. The bright chatter that filled the air only an hour ago has dulled to a murmur of complaint and urgency. It is as though the city, without admitting it openly, has recognized that something unusual is pressing down from the sky. You feel it yourself as the flakes strike harder, pricking the skin of your face like sand carried on wind. They blur your vision, forcing you to blink often, and dampen your gloves until the leather begins to cling cold against your fingers. The stone street beneath you grows slick, a thin crust of snow turning patches of ice into traps for careless steps. A man just ahead of you slips, arms flailing, landing hard on his hip before scrambling upright again, swearing into the air as though his anger might halt the storm. No one stops to help him. Everyone is too intent on keeping their own footing. The sounds shift too. Horses snort louder, nostrils flaring as they stamp uneasily. Harness chains jangle, drivers curse, and wheels grind against the stones as wagons fight for purchase. Somewhere above, a loose shutter bangs repeatedly against a wall, its rhythm swallowed by the rising howl of wind between the buildings. You listen to the city trying to keep its routine alive, but already the music of the morning feels broken, the tempo uneven, the notes discordant. The cold sharpens as the wind cuts more fiercely through the streets. It sneaks down the collar of your coat, despite the buttons pulled tight, curling around your throat and settling like ice along your spine. You shiver and tug the lapels closer, though the gesture does little good. Your breath emerges in thicker clouds now, streaming sideways with each gust. The dampness has reached through the seams of your boots, chilling your toes until you curl them inside the leather, an instinctive attempt at warmth that fails almost instantly. You glance upward, but the sky offers no clarity. It is not a storm in the usual sense, with dramatic rolls of thunder or lightning to announce itself. It is quieter, more insidious, a slow drowning in white. The flakes thicken, filling the air, obscuring the lines of buildings, dimming the lamps still burning from the night before. The horizon is gone. The world ends only a few yards ahead. You squint, trying to trace your way forward, but each step feels less certain. Still, there is work to be done. People tell themselves this, muttering it under their breath, clutching their parcels tighter, hurrying their children along. You share the impulse, though already you sense that the day's tasks will not be finished as planned. A shop may be shut, an appointment cancelled, a delivery delayed. Yet you walk on, unwilling to surrender the hours so early. You tell yourself the snow will ease, that this is only another passing squall. The city has endured countless such days before, but your body knows otherwise. The flakes strike harder, and each gust forces you to squint against the sting. Your shoulders rise instinctively toward your ears, your hands ball in your pockets, your stride shortens. Around you, others do the same, a whole street moving faster, tighter, more defensive. No one remarks on it aloud, but every movement betrays the same thought. Perhaps it is time to turn back. You notice shutters slamming down again, sharp reports that cut through the muffled air. Shopkeepers lean into their doors, locking them firmly against the wind. A wagon rumbles past, its driver hunched low, cloak whipping violently behind him, wheels throwing up sheets of snow that coat the flanks of his horses. A woman clutches her basket with both hands, head bowed, skirts thrashing around her ankles as she fights to stay upright. The city is still alive, still moving, but it has lost its easy rhythm. Urgency has replaced routine. Another gust drives the flakes straight into your eyes and you stagger, blinking hard, tears streaming from the sting. Your cheeks feel raw, your ears burn, your nose drips. You pull your scarf higher, but it soaks quickly, clinging wet against your lips. Each breath tastes of cloth and cold, bitter and metallic. You cough, the sound swallowed instantly by the wind. You tug your collar higher, the fabric stiff and damp beneath your gloves. The thought creeps in almost naturally. as though whispered by the storm itself. Better to head home while you still can. By the time midday creeps across the clock, the sky has all but disappeared. What should have been a brighter hour is smothered under a ceiling of white, heavy, and impenetrable. The flakes no longer drift or sweep in playful gusts. They attack in sheets, hurled sideways with such force that you cannot tell whether they fall from the sky or surge up from the ground. The world becomes a single, colourless void where distance vanishes. Buildings blur, then vanish. People dissolve into outlines, then into shadows, then into nothing at all. You are left in a city you know by memory, not by sight, its familiar lines erased by a storm, determined to make you doubt even the ground beneath your feet. The sound changes with the collapse of light. What had been a steady clatter of hooves and voices now breaks apart into fragments. A wagon wheel grinds and is silenced, its driver's shout swallowed whole by the wind. The iron groan of a telegraph pole, bending under strain, pierces the air, followed by the whip crack of it, snapping and collapsing into the drifts below. You hear the brittle twang of wires sagging and breaking, their tension loosed all at once, sending sparks into the storm before vanishing in darkness. Each noise is sharp, violent, and fleeting, cut short as though the storm itself refuses to allow any sound to linger. The wind is everywhere at once. It does not arrive in gusts that you can brace against, but in a constant, hammering assault that pushes from all directions. It slams against your chest, pulls at your coat, forces tears from your eyes until your vision is a blur of wetness and white. Your ears ring with the ceaseless howl, a roar so steady that it feels like silence stretched thin, a single, unbroken note that drowns thought. You try to shout once more to reassure yourself that you still exist and to call for help, but your voice is torn away the moment it leaves your mouth. The storm does not permit speech. The streets, you know, are gone. Where there should be the rattle of carriages, there are only shapes half seen. Hulks buried to their axles in snow. Horses collapsing in the traces with eyes rolling white and breath frozen to their muzzles. Drivers tug at reins in panic, but the animals flail helplessly, legs trapped in drifts that swallow them to the chest. You catch sight of one horse rearing, screaming into the wind before it topples sideways into a mound that engulfs it. Its driver stumbles away, cloak whipping like a broken sail, until he too is erased in the curtain of snow. You force yourself onward, boots sinking deep, each step a battle against the weight that pulls you down. The drifts are rising faster than you can comprehend. Only minutes ago you walked on cobblestones. Now you wade through waist-high walls of snow that shift and collapse beneath you. Your legs ache, thighs burning, as you drag yourself forward. The cold water seeps into your boots, with every plunge, soaking your socks, numbing your toes until they no longer seem part of your body. You stumble often, catching yourself against fences that jut out like bones from a corpse, the only landmarks still visible above the ever-thickening ground. You glimpse the outlines of buildings, but they loom strangely, blurred and shrunken, as if receding even while you approach. Windows are blank, shutters nailed against the storm, doors sealed tight. The air between you and them is so thick with snow that they appear no more real than shadows on a wall. You press forward, straining to reach the shelter they promise, only to find the distance lengthens with every step. The city itself seems to retreat, abandoning you to the storm's appetite. Around you, pieces of the modern city collapse as though they were never sturdy to begin with. Telegraph poles crack and fall, the wires that once stitched the nation together, now nothing more than twisted lines vanishing into snow. Streetcars sit abandoned on their tracks, windows coated in frost, doors swinging uselessly in the wind. Their passengers fled, or worse, remain inside, invisible, silent, already stiffened by the cold. The grand machine of progress, the pride of the century, the very proof that New York was a city of modern wonders, falls apart in the span of an hour, silenced by weather more ancient and unyielding than any invention of man. Your body begins to rebel. The raw skin of your face burns as though scrubbed with sand. The wind scours your cheeks until they feel flayed, and your lips crack, bleeding when you try to moisten them with your tongue. Your eyes water constantly, the tears freezing at the corners, crusting your lashes together. Your hands ache despite the gloves, each finger stiffening into uselessness. You clench and unclench them inside the wool, but the effort yields little warmth. The cold has already claimed them, working its way bone deep, promising that it will not let go. Still you push forward, guided by stubbornness as much as instinct. To stop moving is to die. You know this with a certainty deeper than thought. So you stumble half-blind into the storm, hoping that each step carries you closer to home. But the landmarks are gone, erased beneath a shifting topography of white walls and false horizons. A street you should recognize now appears as nothing more than a trench carved by wind, with no signposts or lamps to orient you. You turn, hesitate, move again, each decision made in desperation rather than confidence. Every few yards brings new hazards. A cart lies overturned, wheels jutting at odd angles, its contents strewn and buried beneath snow. You nearly trip over a barrel half submerged, catching yourself only at the last moment. Further along, you stumble into what you realise is the side of a wagon, its canvas cover snapping violently in the wind like the sail of a ship about to founder. You hear a muffled groan from within, but cannot linger. The storm drives you onward, demanding movement above compassion. You stagger away, guilt gnawing, even as your body insists you must save yourself before you can save anyone else. The noise is unrelenting. It fills every crevice of the city, hammering against brick, rattling through chimneys, pressing against your chest, until each breath is a labour. The storm does not rage in bursts. It sustains, like a furnace of ice into which the entire city has been cast. The air itself feels solid, pressing against you with the weight of stone, smothering you even as it freezes you. You cannot remember what silence sounded like, or what light looked like. There is only the white, the howl, the endless assault. You stumble once more, knees buckling, palms slamming into the snow that swallows them whole. For a moment you remain crouched, gasping, eyes squeezed shut against the stinging flakes. Your lungs burn, your body trembles, your mind flickers with the thought that you might not rise again. The cold seeps into your joints, whispering that it would be easier to remain here, to let the snow pile higher until you vanish. But some deeper instinct surges, a final protest, and you lurch upright again, swaying as you find your balance. You press onward, though the city no longer feels like a place you know. The storm has devoured the map in your head, leaving only fragments of memory and the faintest impressions of space. Where once there were corners, shops, or familiar lamps, there is now only blankness, an endless churn of white that erases the edges of the world. You grope for fences, posts, anything that will keep you from drifting into the void. Each time your glove closes on wood or iron, you cling hard, grateful for the anchor, before dragging yourself forward into more emptiness. The storm gives no direction, no hint of where safety might lie, only the insistence of its assault from every side. Your boots, once stiff with leather and salt, are now heavy with icy water. Snow seeps in from the tops, melts against your socks, and settles in cold puddles at your toes. Every step squelches, each movement more sluggish than the last. The water freezes quickly, leaving your feet encased in blocks of chill so severe that you lose feeling in your toes altogether. You curl them instinctively within your boots, trying to summon warmth, but the cold resists, gnawing deeper until it feels as though the bones themselves have grown brittle. You imagine they might snap if you put too much weight on them, but you have no choice but to continue. Each breath is its own torment. The air feels thin, sharpened to blades that slice down your throat with every gasp. Your lungs ache as though they are filling with frost rather than air, and you cough against the burning, the sound muffled instantly by the roar of wind. Your chest tightens, ribs sore from the struggle, and the act of breathing becomes deliberate work, not something you can trust your body to do on its own. You suck in short gulps and let them out slowly, trying to control the rhythm, but the storm forces itself into you regardless, filling you with its cold until you feel hollow inside. Your face takes the worst of it. The wind scours your skin raw, flaying cheeks and nose until they burn with the sting of sand and ice. Tears stream from your eyes, freezing at the corners, sealing your lashes into stiff spikes that cloud your vision further. Your lips crack each time you open your mouth, splitting into painful seams that bleed and freeze in the same moment. The scarf drawn over your lower face grows heavy with moisture, first damp, then solid with ice, so that every breath passes through a crust that stings your skin. You pull it tighter, then looser, never satisfied, always miserable. The cold has claimed your features, leaving you barely able to recognize yourself if a mirror were to appear in front of you. The city feels erased, not only by sight, but by sound. Where there should be the clamour of commerce, the neighing of horses, the chatter of voices, there is now only the storm's ceaseless howl. It presses into your ears until they ring, a high-pitched note that never ends. You hear other noises faintly, shouts, crashes, perhaps even the cry of a child, but each is fleeting, stolen instantly by the wind before you can turn your head. You realise you could pass within feet of another person and never know it. The storm has not only buried the city in snow, but has smothered the very evidence of life within it. You stagger against walls, palms splayed against brick that feels slick with frost. The roughness scrapes your gloves, the chill sinking through the leather into your hands. You lean hard, shoulders braced, dragging yourself along like a prisoner clinging to a cell wall. The buildings give you direction, or at least the illusion of it, but even they are unreliable. Their outlines warp in the curtain of snow, windows vanish beneath crusts of ice, and doors disappear beneath mounting drifts. The places you once knew are unrecognizable, and you begin to wonder if you're walking past your own street without realizing it. Your home already sealed just steps away. The ground itself turns treacherous. Snow piles unevenly, drifting high in some places, thin in others, so that every step is a gamble. You plunge waist deep into a hollow, your body jolted as the snow closes around your legs like a trap. You thrash, panic tightening your chest, before dragging yourself free, heart pounding as if you narrowly escaped drowning. A moment later, your boot strikes a patch of ice hidden beneath the powder, and you skid forward, arms flailing, barely catching yourself on a post. Each movement becomes not just an effort, but a risk, the city itself conspiring to pull you down. You pass what must once have been wagons, though they are now little more than hulks buried to their wheels, canvas covers stretched and torn by the wind. Horses lie beside them, outlines softened by snow, their bodies already frozen stiff. You avert your gaze, unwilling to look too closely at the lifeless shapes that might just as easily be people. The storm does not distinguish, and you know you cannot afford to linger on any of them. Your mind insists on one thought alone: forward. The fences and posts you clutch are fewer now, swallowed by drifts or broken by wind. When you find one, you hold it longer, gripping until your arms ache, reluctant to let go. It is too easy to imagine being swept sideways into a blank corridor of snow and never finding your way back. You force yourself forward anyway, one slow step at a time, each movement an act of defiance against a storm that seems intent on erasing you, as it has erased the city. Your body grows clumsier, your limbs less responsive. Fatigue dulls your movements, turning them sluggish, uncertain. You stagger often, knees buckling, shoulders slamming into walls, hips catching on posts. Each collision bruises but also reassures, proof that the world still exists in solid form, that you're not lost entirely in a dream of white. You mutter words to yourself, though you cannot hear them, mouthing fragments of prayers, curses, or nonsense, anything to anchor yourself in the knowledge that you are still moving, still alive, still present. Through the storm, the faintest suggestion of shape emerges. At first, it seems a trick of the eyes, some darker patch of snow, or a distortion in the swirling white. You squint, blink hard, and it resolves into outlines, angled lines, upright forms. A row of houses, perhaps, or the signboards of shops clinging stubbornly above their buried doors. You stagger toward the shapes through the blur, heart pounding at the thought that they might offer a chance at escape. As the outlines sharpen, you see they are indeed buildings, a row of houses pressed close together, their windows rimmed with frost, their roofs sagging under snow. A tavern sits among them, its signboard swinging violently on its chain, the painted letters half obscured by ice. The sight steadies you, even as your body threatens to give out. You force yourself to the nearest door, lean your shoulder against it, and pound with the flat of your hand. For a moment, nothing happens. The wind roars, the snow stings, and the silence on the other side feels worse than the storm. Then you catch the faintest flicker of movement through the crack of a curtain. Someone is inside. You pound again, louder this time, your gloved fist striking wood until your knuckles ache. The shadow freezes, then vanishes. A bolt slides into place, the sound sharp even through the storm. You shout your words ragged, torn apart before they can form, but the only reply is silence. Whoever was there has chosen not to answer. You stumble to the next house, dragging yourself along the wall. The snow piles higher against the doors here, forcing you to kick it aside before you can even reach the handle. You bang with the side of your fist, then with both hands, shouting until your throat burns. For a second, you hear muffled voices inside, hushed and urgent. You strain to catch them, pressing your ear to the door, but the storm drowns them. Then, unmistakably, you hear the metallic scrape of a lock sliding firmly into place. They will not open. The truth settles in with a weight heavier than the snow. No one will admit you. Behind every shutter and curtain there are people, curled near their fires, listening to your blows against the wood, and choosing silence over mercy. You imagine their faces, pale in the dim light, children hushed by parents who whisper that to open the door is to invite death inside. A stranger means risk, another mouth to feed, another body to crowd near the hearth. Warmth must be rationed, food stretched, air preserved. To save themselves, they will let you freeze. You try the tavern next, hoping its owner might show more charity. The sign creaks above you, metal shrieking on chain, while you hammer at the thick wooden door until your arms tremble. For a moment, you believe you hear shuffling inside, the scuff of boots across a floor. A faint glow spills briefly from a side window, a lantern set down hastily, but the door remains shut. When you pause to catch your breath, you hear it. The dull, deliberate sound of a bar sliding into place, a final refusal. You shout again, voice cracking, but the tavern offers nothing but silence. Moving down the row, you try door after door, window after window, each one the same. A flicker of movement, a curtain shifting, a voice hushed, then the unmistakable click of locks and bolts. You beg now, words tumbling without sense, promises and pleas pouring from your mouth, though you know they cannot be heard. Your fists leave prints in the snow caked on the doors, your gloves stiffening with ice as you strike harder, as though effort alone could batter your way inside. But each blow yields nothing. The storm howls and the houses refuse you. Between the houses you see narrow alleys, but they are no safer. Snow has filled them entirely, piled high against the walls until they appear less like streets than tombs. The drifts rise nearly to the windowsills, cutting off any chance of slipping between the buildings for refuge. You glance down one and see only darkness, a deep trench where the wind funnels even stronger. You turn away quickly, the thought of stepping into that void too much to bear. The street itself is misery enough. With every refusal, your strength dwindles further. The pounding leaves your arms weak, your hands numb within your sodden gloves. Your breath rasps in your throat, each inhale cutting like glass. Your knees threaten to give way, trembling under the effort of standing. You press your forehead briefly against a door, the wood icy against your skin, even through your hat, and realize you cannot go on like this. Yet you cannot stay either. If you collapse here, you will be found days later, stiff and pale, slumped against the very homes that would not open their doors. You push yourself back, staggering into the middle of the street. Snow swirls around you, filling the prints you left only moments ago, erasing the evidence of your desperation as though it never happened. The buildings loom silent and shut, their windows blind, their doors impenetrable. You think of the families huddled just feet away, perhaps whispering prayers for the storm to end, perhaps pretending not to hear the stranger who begged them for shelter. They will live another day because they denied you. That is the bargain the storm has forced upon the city. The wind strikes harder, forcing you to crouch low, your coat snapping against your body. The flakes sting your eyes, coating your lashes until you see little more than shapes in constant motion. You turn, searching for any sign of welcome, any crack of light, but there is nothing. Every shutter is fastened, every lock engaged. The city has withdrawn into itself, and you are cast out into its frozen shell. You begin to move again, slow and clumsy, forcing your legs to obey. Each step is agony, boots heavy with water, thighs burning as you drag them through drifts. Your body feels weaker, less certain, as though the storm has already hollowed you out and left you to stumble in its wreckage. Still you move, because the alternative is to sink into the snow and let it close over you. Behind you, the row of houses fades into the white, their outlines swallowed once more by the storm. The tavern's sign creaks faintly, then disappears from sight. You are alone again, no doors left to knock upon, no voices left to plead with. The storm has rejected you through the hands of your neighbours, and you are left weaker, more desperate, stripped of even the fragile hope that walls and fires might offer. The storm does not ease after the rejection at the shuttered doors. It grows worse, as if mocking the effort you spent pounding your fists against wood. The snow thickens, the wind strengthens, and the city you knew recedes further into nothingness. The streets are no longer streets at all, but trenches carved from ice, their walls rising higher with every minute. You wade through them like a soldier lost in a battlefield, the ground uneven, your body half submerged, each step dragging at your strength. The drifts close in behind you almost as quickly as you leave them, swallowing your trail, erasing the proof that you have passed. You look upward once, trying to reassure yourself that the buildings still stand, but they are mere smudges of shadow, outlines warped by the swirling white. Their doors and windows are long since buried, their chimneys barely visible beneath the loads heaped upon their roofs. You no longer walk in a city, but in a labyrinth of snow, each alley indistinguishable from the next. The stones beneath your boots are gone, the familiar rattle of iron and wheel silenced. You move through an alien landscape, and for the first time, you begin to believe that the New York you knew has vanished altogether. The horses cannot endure it. They collapse where they stand, legs folding, bodies half sinking into the drifts before stiffening in place. Some remain tangled in their harnesses, eyes wide, flanks heaving until the breath freezes at their nostrils. Drivers tug helplessly at reins, their voices hoarse with curses and pleas, but the animals do not rise again. The storm has claimed them, one by one, until the sound of hooves on cobblestones, a sound as constant as your own heartbeat, is gone. Where the streets once rang with their clatter, now there is only the howl of wind and the occasional groan of leather straining before slackening in surrender. Carriages stand abandoned mid-road, their wheels frozen into place, their interiors empty. Some lean at odd angles, tilted as though half swallowed by the snow. Curtains flap in the wind, canvas stretched taut until it tears, threads snapping like brittle twigs. You pass them without stopping, knowing that inside you will find nothing but stiff benches, already dusted with white. The drivers have fled or collapsed nearby, and you have no strength to investigate. The carriages remain as monuments to a city caught unprepared, its progress undone in hours. You stumble against a shape lying in the snow and reel back, heart thundering, before realizing it is not debris, but a body. The outline is unmistakable. An arm curled against a chest, legs bent at unnatural angles, head tilted back as though in mid-breath. Snow has nearly buried the figure, smoothing it into a soft mound, but the suggestion of human form is still visible. You cannot tell whether it is man or woman, young or old. The storm has stripped away every detail, reducing a life to nothing more than a contour in the drifts. As you move forward, you see more. Here, the faint ridge of a shoulder rising from the snow. There, the curve of a knee, the frozen fabric of a coat stiffened into permanence. They lie scattered like discarded dolls, half remembered and half erased, and the sight tightens your chest until you force yourself not to look. To stare too long is to imagine yourself among them. Another outline in the white, another shape passed without recognition. You fix your gaze on the blur ahead, though it offers no comfort, only more storm. The air grows harsher, slicing into every exposed inch of flesh. Your cheeks are raw, your ears numb, your hands wooden in their gloves. You feel less like a living body and more like an object, slowly surrendering to the elements, stiffening at the edges, joints reluctant to bend. Each movement requires deliberate force, as though you're dragging yourself through thick mud instead of snow. Your breathing is ragged, the storm forcing its way into your lungs until you cough violently, doubled over, your chest aflame. For a moment you remain crouched in the drift, afraid you will not rise again, but instinct pushes you upright. To stop is to join the shapes you passed. The city is unrecognizable. Where there should be streets, there are only trenches of snow. Where there should be signs and lamps, there are only vague smudges of shadow. The details of the world have been rubbed out, leaving only pale void and rushing sound. You try to recall the grid of roads, the landmarks that once guided you, but they dissolve in your mind like the snowflakes on your tongue earlier in the day. All that remains is disorientation, the gnawing sense that you might already have wandered far from where you intended, that you're circling without knowing it. You lean hard against a wall, but even it feels unsteady. The bricks slick, their edges blurred by ice. You drag yourself forward, fingers splayed against the surface, boots plunging deeper each step. The world narrows to the space immediately before you, the stretch of wall, the drift at your feet, the next breath of air you can manage to draw. Beyond that, there is nothing. The storm has devoured the city and replaced it with an endless corridor of white. Somewhere in the blur, a crash resounds. You turn your head in time to see a telegraph pole collapse, its length swinging wildly before shattering against the ground. Wires snap with explosive force, coiling like whips before vanishing into the snow. Sparks leap briefly, tiny stars against the void, before darkness swallows them. The infrastructure that once promised connection, progress, modernity, stripped away in seconds, as fragile as twine. You stare until the storm obscures even that, and then you move on, knowing the same fate waits for every pole, every line, every boast of a city too proud to think it could be humbled. Your exhaustion deepens into something heavier than fatigue. It feels as though the storm is not merely around you, but inside you, hollowing you out, scraping away strength from within. Your legs drag, your arms hang limp until forced into motion. Your head bows no matter how often you lift it. You mutter to yourself, but the sound is lost, your own voice carried away before you can hear it. You begin to doubt your own existence, to wonder if you too are dissolving into the storm, becoming nothing more than another vague outline soon to be buried. Then through the roar, another sound pierces. It is faint at first, nearly mistaken for a trick of the ear, a vibration beneath the wind rather than a true noise. You stop tilting your head, and there it is again. Long, low, and unmistakable, a horn carrying across the storm, warped by distance, but clear enough to recognize. The sound comes again, thin but insistent, and this time you cannot mistake it. Even here, blocks inland, the storm carries the cry of the harbour to your ears. It is a noise unlike the wind, lower and more deliberate, the horn of a ship in distress cutting through the chaos. The call rises, wavers, and breaks, as though the air itself resists the sound, muffling it beneath layers of snow. You pause in the drift, body swaying, and listen with everything you have, straining for proof that you are not imagining it. When the horn sounds once more, joined by another in a higher register, the truth settles into you with a shiver colder than any gust of wind. The sea is suffering just as the city is, dragged into the storm's grip, and those who trust its waters are no safer than those who walk these buried streets. You close your eyes and for a moment you can picture it, though you wish you could not. The harbour you know, usually so alive with the constant arrival and departure of ships, is now a pit of violence. Snow drives across the waves as it does across the streets, the white spray indistinguishable from the flakes. The water, already black, is churned to froth, lifting ships like toys and smashing them down again. Masts sway against the pale sky until they snap like twigs, splintering into the gale. You imagine sailors clinging to the rigging, their fingers stiff with cold, faces lashed with spray until they cannot see. One by one they slip, vanish into the surf, swallowed instantly by waves too massive to fight. The horns are their last protests, their only way to cry for help in a world that cannot answer. You hear one long blast, steady but fading, and you know it belongs to a ship caught broadside by the storm, its captain fighting to keep the bow to the wind, his men scrambling with ropes and sails that freeze in their hands. Another horn wavers, falters, then ceases altogether, a silence that feels like finality. Somewhere in that silence, a crew has already vanished, their ship broken apart and dragged beneath the harbour's grey surface. The storm consumes sea and city alike, showing no preference, no mercy. The streets you stagger through, once believed to be the stronghold of progress, are no different from the water's battering wooden hulls. Brick and mortar, iron and steel, canvas and timber. None of it matters. The gale tears at all with equal hunger. You think of the sailors trapped in their own desperate struggle and realise how small your own fight is in comparison. Yet the truth is crueler still. Both struggles are the same, both hopeless. The sailor in the rigging and the wanderer in the street share the same fate. The storm does not distinguish between land and sea, only between those it has claimed already and those it will claim soon. Another cry reaches you, this one not a horn, but the tortured shriek of wood splintering. It carries across the wind like the groan of a giant, a ship's frame cracking apart under the force of the waves. You flinch at the sound, though you stand far from the water's edge, because it is the sound of something larger than men succumbing to the storm. You imagine timbers splitting, decks tilting, men tumbling into the sea while the vessel sinks beneath them. The image lodges in your mind and will not leave, as though you're standing on that deck with them, feeling it tilt beneath your boots, even while your own feet are trapped in snow. You shake your head, trying to force the vision away, but the storm presses it deeper, weaving the cries of the harbour into its own chorus. Each gust seems to carry not only snow, but fragments of suffering from the water. Shouts, splashes, the panicked calls of men who know they are lost. You cannot tell if they are real or imagined, if the storm is truly carrying voices this far inland, or if your mind has begun to invent them. Either way, the effect is the same. You hear them, you feel them, and they weigh on you with a dread more suffocating than the snow itself. You press forward again, though the effort feels more meaningless than ever. If the harbour cannot withstand the storm, then what chance do you have? You tell yourself that land offers more safety than sea, that walls and hearths can resist what waves cannot. But the thought rings hollow. You have already seen the shuttered doors, already felt the refusal of your neighbours. The houses may stand longer than ships, but they too can fail, their roofs groaning, their fires sputtering. The sea has its graveyard, but so too does the city. The difference is only in the shape of the tomb. The horns sound again, but fainter now, their notes broken by the growing howl. You pause once more, straining to hear, but the storm swallows them quickly. The cries are no longer sharp but muffled, buried beneath layers of noise until they seem like echoes from another world. For a moment you wonder if the ships themselves have already sunk, if the last voices you heard were ghosts carried inland by the gale. You listen, hold your breath, wait for another blast, but none comes. Only the wind remains, steady, ceaseless, unrelenting. The absence of the horns feels heavier than their sound. At least when they cried out, there was the illusion of life, the suggestion of resistance. Now there is only silence, and you know what that silence means. The harbour has fallen quiet, not because the storm has relented, but because it has finished its work. The men who braced against the masts, the crews who pulled at frozen ropes, the captains who clung to wheels, they are gone now, their ships broken beneath the waves. The storm does not need to roar any louder. Its silence is proof of victory. The knowledge chills you deeper than the wind. The storm has erased not just streets and landmarks, but voices, lives, entire vessels. The proof lies in the stillness that follows, the absence of sound, where once there was struggle. You realise you have been standing still too long, caught in the visions of the harbour, and the snow has already crept higher around your legs. You wrench yourself free, dragging one foot after the other, reminding yourself that you cannot afford to pause. You bow your head, shoulders hunched, and force yourself to move. The harbour is gone, the sea consumed, but your own fight continues. Your body insists on forward motion, no matter how hopeless it feels. You walk blindly at first, guided by memory rather than sight. The harbour's cries have faded, swallowed by the storm's endless roar, and the thought of your home becomes the single thread that keeps you moving. You try to summon the map in your head. Streets that once made sense, corners you've turned 1,000 times, fences and signposts you could navigate in darkness. But the storm has transformed them all. Where there were roads, there are only trenches of snow. Where there were windows and lamps, there are only blurred shadows. Each step feels like a guess, a prayer whispered into the white void. Then at last, something solid appears through the haze. A fence half buried, its posts jutting out at uneven intervals, their tops capped with heavy mounds of snow. You blink hard, doubting your eyes, until your glove touches the frozen wood and confirms it. The rough surface feels real beneath your palm, an anchor in the storm's sea. relief floods you, though it is tinged with dread. If the fence is where you think it is, then your street must be close, but so too is the realization that your body is nearly at its end. You drag yourself along the fence, gripping one post after another, head bowed against the wind. The snow clings to your coat, stiffening it until it feels like a weight rather than protection. Your legs ache with every step, boots sodden, toes numb beyond sensation. Yet the familiarity of the fence carries you forward, reminding you that this is not endless wilderness, that somewhere nearby a door still waits for you. Through the blur, you begin to trace the outline of rooftops sagging under snow, their chimneys barely visible above the drifts. The sight steadies you, though it also fills you with unease. Home should be comfort, but in this storm, it looks no safer than the harbour. The shape of your street emerges at last, though it is nothing like the one you left in the morning. What was once a row of houses and shops is now a jagged corridor of snow. The facades nearly erased, their windows sealed, their doors buried. The drifts are piled so high that they resemble cliffs, with only narrow seams of shadow to mark where alleys once ran. You step into the hollow that was once the road, feeling as though you are descending into a canyon carved from ice. The familiar street has become unrecognizable, and for a moment you doubt whether you're truly where you think you are. But then you see it, faint but certain. The outline of your own house, huddled beneath the weight of the storm, half consumed but still standing. The sight brings a surge of strength you did not know you had. You lurch forward, stumbling against the drifts, forcing your body through the narrowing trench. The snow resists, dragging at your boots, filling the space behind you as quickly as you make it. Your lungs burn, your chest heaves, but you do not stop. Each step is a declaration, a refusal to collapse so close to shelter. You reach the stoop, now a mound, and claw at the snow with numb hands, shoving it aside until you can force your shoulder against the door. The door resists at first, swollen by damp, pressed inward by drifts. You lean harder, throw your weight against it, and with a groan of wood, it yields. You stumble inside, half falling, and slam it shut behind you. The silence that follows is jarring, almost painful. The roar of the storm dulls to a muffled moan, the snow thick enough to smother its voice. You lean against the door, chest heaving, and let the dimness of the room settle around you. The house is no warmer than the street, though it shields you from the wind. The hearth glows faintly, its fire nothing more than a smoulder of embers clinging to life. The air is damp and cold, each breath fogging before your face. You peel the gloves from your hands, and your fingers emerge stiff red, trembling as though unsure they still belong to you. You cross the room slowly, knees weak, and crouch before the hearth, holding your palms close to the faint glow. The meagre heat kisses your skin, but does little to ease the numbness. Still, it is enough to remind you that warmth exists, however fragile. You glance toward the coal bin and feel a heavier dread. It is nearly empty, a shallow scatter of black lumps at the bottom, no more than a day's worth at best. You remember how the deliveries had grown irregular, how you told yourself the weather would soon improve, that March would not require as much fuel. Now those small calculations mock you. The storm has trapped you with too little to last, and every choice becomes sharper. Do you feed the fire generously and bask in its warmth for a few hours, knowing it will be gone before long? Or do you ration it, stretching the misery across a longer night? You reach into the bin and grasp a lump, fingers trembling, and set it carefully on the embers. A faint hiss, a crackle, and the glow brightens, reluctant flames licking upward. You add another, and then another, until the hearth flares with life. The sudden warmth spreads across your face, stinging as sensation floods back into your skin. You close your eyes, feeling both relief and dread. Each lump of coal you place into the fire is one less that remains. one step closer to the end. But you cannot stop yourself. After the storm outside, the temptation of heat is too great to resist. The house creaks under the weight of snow, the roof groaning as gusts slam against it. You glance upward, half expecting collapse, but the beams hold. For now. The windows are buried, their panes coated with frost, no light seeping through. The room feels like a cave, sealed away from the world, lit only by the flickering hearth. You sit heavily in a chair, arms limp, legs stretched toward the flames, and let exhaustion wash over you. The storm rages just beyond the walls, but for the moment you're spared its direct assault. Your body trembles as the warmth slowly penetrates, nerves awakening with painful tingles. You flex your hands, watching the skin crack where it has dried. The knuckles raw and red. You peel off your coat, heavy with snow, and hang it across a chair to drip onto the floor. The wet sound of melting is steady, rhythmic, like a clock counting down the hours left to you. You listen to it without comfort, aware that time is short, that the storm will last longer than your coal. The fire consumes the lumps quickly, flames snapping and then settling into steady burn. You feed another handful, your hands shaking as you fumble, the pieces slipping from your grip. The bin grows emptier with each motion, its bottom already visible. You think of the night ahead, the hours of darkness that will stretch without mercy, and you know the fire cannot survive them all. Yet you cannot resist stoking it now, needing its light, its fragile promise of life. Darkness settles quickly, as if the storm has swallowed the sun whole, rather than merely hidden it. The room that was already dim in the afternoon becomes a chamber of shadows. The fire flickers weakly, the last lumps of coal burning down into thin, reluctant flames. Beyond the walls, the storm does not relent. It howls with the same merciless fury as before, slamming against the house with gusts so violent that the timbers shudder. Snow strikes the windows in steady waves, each impact muffled but insistent, as though the storm is determined to break through every barrier and claim the warmth inside. You pile blankets over your body, layer after layer, until the weight presses heavily on your chest. The cloth smells faintly of damp and smoke, but you cling to it, grateful for any barrier against the cold. The fire's glow licks faintly at the walls, casting crooked shapes that tremble with each flicker. You curl tighter in your chair, trying to hold the warmth near, but the cold is everywhere. It seeps from the floorboards, drips from the ceiling, and presses in from every crack. Each breath emerges as mist, drifting into the air before vanishing. It feels less like being sheltered, and more like being sealed into a tomb. The noises of the house become your only companions. The beams creak overhead as the roof bears the weight of snow, piling relentlessly above. The sound is not constant but comes in sudden groans that make your stomach clench. Each one feels like a warning that the roof may give way, that the snow will pour in and smother you before you have time to rise. The walls tremble under each gust, rattling the glass panes until they quiver in their frames. You listen to every sound, waiting for the one that signals collapse, straining to judge which groan is ordinary and which spells disaster. The fire sputters, shrinking as the coal burns away. Each time the flames dip, the room seems to close in tighter, the corners darkening, the ceiling lowering. You prod the embers with a poker, coaxing them into brief brightness. But the heat that reaches you is thin, more illusion than reality. You consider breaking a chair for kindling, stripping the table of its legs, but even that would only buy hours at best. The coal is gone, and the storm has made certain there will be no more. The thought gnaws at you as steadily as the cold, a constant reminder that what warmth you cling to is already doomed to fail. You lie back under the blankets, body heavy, eyes fixed on the fire. Sleep refuses you, though exhaustion drags at your limbs. Every time you close your eyes, the roar of the wind startles them open again. You hear the storm speaking in tones that are not human but feel personal all the same. It hammers the shutters like fists, moans through the chimney like voices, rattles the latch like a hand testing whether it can come inside. You remind yourself it is only weather, nothing alive, but the thought fails to comfort. The storm feels alive and it feels patient. The air grows colder as the hours stretch. The blankets insulate poorly. Damp gathers in the folds and spreads across your clothes. Your toes are numb within your boots, your fingers stiff beneath their coverings. You tuck your hands against your chest, drawing your knees up, trying to make yourself smaller, more compact, as if you can conserve heat by becoming less. Your body shivers uncontrollably, muscles twitching with effort, but even the tremors cannot drive the cold away. It burrows deeper, past skin and bone, until it feels as though it lives inside your marrow. Time loses shape. Minutes feel like hours and hours blur into something longer. You stare at the fire until your eyes burn, convinced you can measure time by the collapse of each coal into ash. Yet the fire burns unevenly, flaring briefly before sinking again, tricking you into thinking more time has passed than it has. You try counting, try humming under your breath, try anything to mark the hours, but each attempt falters as the storm drowns it out. You begin to believe you will remain here forever, trapped in a night that has no end. Your stomach aches with hunger, a hollow pang that grows sharper in the stillness. You think of the bread you finished in the morning, the thin coffee you stretched too far, and you know there will be little to eat in the days ahead. The cupboards are bare, the shops sealed, and the storm has made certain that no fresh supplies will arrive. Hunger becomes another companion, joining the cold and the fear, gnawing steadily until you shift uncomfortably under the blankets. Your mouth is dry, lips cracked, tongue thick. You dream of water that does not exist, of warmth that cannot be found, of silence that the storm will not allow. The house feels smaller with each hour. The buried windows admit no light. The doors press inward with drifts. The walls creak as though tightening around you. You imagine the snow piling higher, swallowing the house whole until it becomes nothing more than another mound in the endless white. The thought steals your breath, a panic rising that has nothing to do with the cold. You sit up suddenly, blankets falling, and listen hard for any sign that the house is losing its shape. The storm answers with a gust so violent that the beams groan above your head and you nearly cry out. But the roof holds and the house remains standing, though the reassurance is fleeting. You crawl back beneath the blankets, clutching them close, and force yourself to remain still. Movement wastes strength, wastes warmth, and you cannot afford either. You lie rigid, staring at the last embers, watching them fade to dull red, then flare weakly, then fade again. Each cycle feels like your own heartbeat, rising and falling, threatening to cease. You tell yourself you must endure until morning, though you have no proof that morning will come. Outside, the storm rages without pause, its voice as strong as it was when night fell. You wonder if the sun itself has been erased, if the storm has conquered even that. The hours crawl, slower than any you have known. Sleep comes in snatches, shallow and restless, filled with dreams of collapse and suffocation. You wake often, heart pounding, certain that the roof has caved or the fire has died entirely. Each time you open your eyes, the same dim glow greets you, the same shadows flickering, the same roar beyond the walls. Time stretches until you lose track, until you cannot say whether you have been awake for minutes or for days. At last, after what feels like a lifetime, a faint shift appears. The darkness does not lift, not truly, but it thins slightly, a weak grey pressing through the buried windows. The grey light that seeps into the room does nothing to relieve the dread of the long night. It is weak, diffuse, the kind of light that carries no warmth, only the suggestion that hours have passed. The storm has not slackened. Its howl still rattles the timbers, still pounds against the roof, still hurls snow into the windows, as though determined to grind the house into dust. You had clung to the idea that morning would bring reprieve, that the gale would ease, that the blizzard would tire. But when you rise from the damp heap of blankets and listen closely, you know it has lost none of its strength. If anything, the voice of the storm feels harsher, renewed by the night it has survived. The house is colder than before, colder even than the streets you braved yesterday. The fire has burned itself down to ash and memory, leaving the hearth dark and lifeless. Your breath fogs heavily in the air, drifting in front of your face before fading, proof that the room is now as frigid as the world outside. The walls do little to shield you. The cold has seeped through them, soaking into floor and ceiling until the very boards seem to sweat with frost. The weight of blankets is no protection. You feel it in your chest, your fingers, your bones. The house is no longer a home but a container, and it contains nothing but cold. Your stomach tightens with hunger. The cupboard holds little more than a few scraps, a hardened crust of bread, a handful of withered carrots gone soft at their edges, a rind of cheese that cracks rather than bends. You gnaw at them without pleasure, chewing because the body insists on fuel, though each bite feels like swallowing ash. The water jug is nearly empty, and your lips are cracked with thirst. Snow surrounds you on every side, yet you have no way to melt it. The thought of scooping it into a bowl and waiting for it to soften crosses your mind, but you know it would chill you further, that even in thirst it might do more harm than good. A panic begins to rise in you, sharper than hunger, sharper even than the cold. The air feels thinner now, stale, used, as though the room has been sealed too tightly. You draw a breath, but it feels shallow. You draw another, deeper, and find it unsatisfying, leaving your chest burning. You think of the snow piled high against the doors and windows, sealing every gap, pressing tighter with each passing hour. The thought of suffocation drives you suddenly to your feet. You cannot simply sit and wait to be buried alive. You must dig out. You must try. You drag your coat over your shoulders once more, its fabric still stiff with yesterday's dampness. The gloves tug on, their seams cracking as you force your hands inside. You wrap the scarf high over your mouth and nose, though the cloth is stiff with frozen breath. Each layer is an ordeal, your fingers clumsy, your limbs sluggish, but at last you're dressed. You square yourself before the door and set your weight against it. The door does not budge. You shove harder, shoulder driving into the wood until the latch rattles. The frame groans faintly, but the pressure from outside is too great. The snow is piled higher than you imagined, pressed so tightly against the house that it feels like a wall of stone. You throw yourself against it again, grunting, the effort sending pain through your ribs. The door creaks open an inch, no more, and in that moment snow spills inward. Fine, sharp flakes pouring like sand through a cracked hourglass. They coat the floorboards, sting your hands, bite into your wrists. You slam the door shut instinctively, heart hammering, as though you have nearly loosed the entire storm into your home. You lean against the wood, chest heaving, forehead damp with sweat that chills instantly in the air. The door is sealed by weight far greater than your strength. You could spend the entire day shoving, clawing, hacking, and still the drifts would win. The walls of snow outside are higher than you, thicker than any path you could carve. You are entombed, and the house is your coffin. For a long moment you simply stand there, palms flat against the door, trembling. You think of what lies on the other side, the endless trenches of white, the half-buried bodies, the abandoned wagons, and you realise that even if you could open it, you would collapse after a few steps. Your body's already too weak. The storm has you pinned in place, trapped not only by its walls of snow, but by your own failing strength. You sag against the door, the realization pressing harder than the drifts themselves. There is no escape here. You retreat slowly into the room, dragging your feet as though the air itself has grown heavy. You sink back into your chair, pull the blankets over yourself again, and stare at the hearth. The ashes shift faintly when a draft moves through the chimney, but no flame stirs. You feel your chest tighten, each breath fogging the air, each inhale weaker than the last. The storm has taken light, food, warmth, and now it is taking air. The thought grows sharper as the hours pass. You watch the frost spread further across the window panes, thickening into opaque white, sealing away what little grey light had entered. You press a hand to the glass and it feels solid, as though the drift has merged with the wall. Your breath grows ragged, each inhale shallow, each exhale laboured. You imagine the snow packed tighter, the air trapped, the space growing thinner until nothing is left. It is not the fire you fear losing now, but the very act of breathing. Defeated, you bow your head, staring at the damp weave of cloth between your hands. You return to the hearth, not for warmth, but for the illusion of it. Your body hunched low, your breath misting steadily. The house is sealed, the snow piled higher than you can fight, and the storm will decide how long you can go on. Panic sharpens the exhaustion, already weighing down your body. The room feels tighter than it did the night before, the air heavier, thicker, as though each breath must be forced through unseen cloth. You sit up from your blankets, chest rising too quickly, and realise you're wheezing. The inhale scrapes, the exhale rattles. It is not only the cold that makes it this way. Something is wrong with the air itself. You look toward the hearth, where the last scraps of coal have been consumed, and where now the flames lick at wood you dragged from the corners of the room. A broken chair, a leg from the table, slats from a crate you'd saved for storage, all of them sacrificed piece by piece to keep the fire alive. You had told yourself there was no choice. Without flame, the house would become a tomb of ice. Yet now the fire, the one thing standing between you and freezing stiff, has made the air sour. Smoke curls upward in lazy ribbons, drifting back down rather than escaping. The chimney is sealed with snow, clogged completely. The room has no vent, no gap, no breath of wind to sweep the fumes away. The smoke hangs in layers you can see, faint grey against the shadows. It burns your eyes, leaving them red and watering. You rub at them with the heel of your hand, but the sting only worsens. Your tongue tastes bitter, coated with ash. Every cough rattles your chest, leaving you doubled over, arms tight across your ribs. For each log you feed the fire, the smoke thickens, its haze settling around you like a second storm, one that exists entirely indoors. You tell yourself you must put the fire out, but the thought dies as quickly as it arrives. Without it, the cold will claim you. Already the room is frigid, even with flames burning. Without them, you would not last an hour. You try instead to ration the wood, placing smaller pieces, coaxing smaller flames. It makes no difference. The smoke builds steadily, seeking corners, soaking the fabric of the curtains, the fibres of the blankets, your own lungs. The irony does not escape you. The more you fight to keep warm, the more you poison yourself. The storm demands a price, and you pay it either way. Your hands tremble as you feed another scrap to the hearth. The wood crackles, flares, and releases another wave of fumes. The chimney coughs faintly, then falls silent. Nothing escapes upward. You lean close, hoping to see a flicker of draught, but there is none. The snow above has pressed so tightly that it may as well be stone. You realise with a hollow certainty that the smoke has no path but into you. The coughing grows worse. At first it is sharp, sudden, leaving you doubled over with tears streaming down your cheeks. Soon it becomes constant, every breath ending in a ragged convulsion. Your chest tightens, ribs aching, throat raw. You spit into the ashes and see streaks of black, soot rising with the saliva, proof of what you have been breathing. The sight chills you more than the storm itself. You cover your mouth with your scarf, but the fabric only traps the fumes closer. You lower it again and cough harder, your body rebelling at the poison it must take in. Your head swims. A dull ache throbs behind your temples, pounding with each heartbeat. The room seems to sway when you rise, the shadows tilting, the walls shrinking closer. You stumble against the table, grip its edge and close your eyes until the dizziness passes. When you open them again, the smoke looks thicker, though you cannot be certain if it is the haze in the air or the haze behind your own eyes. The line between the two has blurred. You think of opening the door again, of forcing it wide despite the drifts, letting the storm rush in just to clear the air. But you remember the snow, spilling inward when you last tried, the weight pressing so heavily that you could barely close it again. To open the door now would bury the room completely. You picture the drifts pouring inside, smothering the fire, covering you before you could rise. You let the thought go. The door is no escape. There is no escape. You drag a chair near the window, thinking perhaps you can chip a hole through the frost, find a gap for the smoke to escape. But when you scrape at the pane, the frost crumbles, only to reveal more white beyond. The drift presses tight, unbroken. You slam the heel of your hand against the glass, but it only rattles weakly, mocking you. Snow pours in at the cracks when you try harder, fine and powdery, spilling onto the floor. It leaves the air no cleaner. You drop back into the chair, chest heaving, head bowed, lungs rattling with each shallow breath. The fire still burns, though faintly. Its warmth is cruel now, mingled with smoke that sears rather than soothes. You cannot bring yourself to extinguish it. Without its light, the room would collapse into a darkness more unbearable than the storm itself. So you let it smoulder, coughing as it eats away at the scraps of wood, its orange glow flickering faintly in the thick air. The hours pass in a blur of wheezing and shivering. Your body trembles violently, sometimes from cold, sometimes from coughing, sometimes from both at once. Each spasm leaves you weaker, and each weak breath leaves you dizzier. You try lying on the floor, where the smoke seems thinner, but the boards are icy, sucking the heat from your bones. You climb back into your nest of blankets, choking on fumes that seep into the cloth, and resign yourself to the poisoned air. The blankets press heavy on you, damp with sweat and frost, smelling of ash. You pull them tighter, curling yourself inward, head bowed against your knees. Your chest feels compressed, ribs banded with iron. Each inhale a shallow, stinging effort. You cough until your throat feels raw, until your eyes water so heavily you can barely see. The room spins with each fit, shadows trembling as though they too are gasping for air. Hours dissolve into one another until you cannot tell where one ends and another begins. Time has lost its shape, melted into a grey blur that feels both endless and fleeting. The light outside has dimmed again, though you hardly noticed it brighten in the first place. A second night is creeping over the buried city, but for you the day has been no more than a string of coughing fits, shallow breaths, and moments when your body sagged against the blankets too heavily to rise again. Hunger gnaws at your belly, not with sharp pains anymore, but with a dull, constant ache that feels as if your stomach is eating itself. Thirst burns even more fiercely. Your lips are cracked, your tongue thick, every swallow scraping at your throat. The smoke that fills the air has coated your mouth in ash, and you cannot remember the last time you tasted water. The fire has burned lower, though scraps of broken wood still sputter in the hearth. The warmth they release is faint, quickly consumed by the draughts of a icy smoke that curl through the room. Each time you stirred yourself to feed it, the effort drained you further. Now you can barely move your arms to tug a blanket closer. let alone rise and search for more to burn. The thought of dismantling the last of the furniture passes through your mind, but the weight in your limbs makes it laughable. You have no strength left to swing a chair, no strength even to stand steadily. The fire will die when it chooses, and you will not stop it. The blankets that cover you, once a small comfort, have become an icy burden. Moisture has seeped into the fabric, first from your sweat, then from the condensation of your breath, and finally from the snow that slipped through the cracks when you tried to dig at the window. They lie heavy across your chest, stiff and damp, their edges rimmed with frost. When you shift, crystals flake against your skin, cold and sharp. Still, you cling to them, curling yourself tighter beneath their weight, as though burying yourself willingly before the storm can finish the task. You drift between waking and sleep, though the difference grows harder to distinguish. When your eyes close, you are assaulted by dreams that feel no less vivid than the room itself. You dream of walking through trenches of snow that rise higher than buildings, of clawing at doors that will not open, of pounding your fists against shutters while shadows watch silently from within. Sometimes you dream of the harbour, the horns blaring, masts splintering, waves swallowing sailors whole. Sometimes you dream of nothing but smoke, a grey tide filling your lungs until you gasp awake, coughing so hard your ribs ache. Each time you wake, you find yourself in the same position, curled under blankets, the same haze of smoke blurring the air, the same dull fire flickering in the corner. The repetition makes the dreams indistinguishable from memory. Your body betrays you in smaller ways now. Your fingers no longer respond with precision. They twitch, clumsy and numb, unable to grasp the edges of the blankets without fumbling. Your legs spasm occasionally, a final protest of muscles refusing to obey. Even your chest feels sluggish, each rise and fall laboured, each inhale a conscious act. You try to breathe deeply, but the air refuses you, scraping at your throat until you cough again, weaker than before. Each fit leaves you trembling, your vision swimming, your head pounding as though it might split. Hunger no longer sharpens your senses. It dulls them instead, a weight pressing from the inside. You remember meals you once dismissed as meagre, bread and butter, a plate of boiled potatoes, and your mouth waters uselessly at the thought. You imagine water, cold and clear, and your throat contracts painfully, begging for what you cannot give it. The ache of thirst eclipses the ache of hunger until it is the only sensation you feel clearly. Your tongue sticks to the roof of your mouth, and you wonder how long the body can go before it simply ceases to demand. The world around you grows blurred, not just by smoke, but by your own failing sight. The fire flickers, but sometimes you see it doubled. Sometimes you see it dimmer than it is. The corners of the room are shadowed, but in those shadows you begin to glimpse shapes that may not exist. Figures standing still, faces in the frost, outlines in the wavering dark. You blink hard, rub your eyes, but the shapes remain for a moment before melting away. Whether they are ghosts, hallucinations, or simply tricks of the smoke, you do not know. You only know that you are not entirely alone, even if the company you keep is not human. The storm continues its assault outside. The walls groan, the roof creaks, the wind hammers endlessly, yet all of it feels distant now. The howl has faded into a background hum, a steady note that lulls rather than alarms. You have grown used to its voice, so much so that you almost miss the sharpness it once carried. It seems softer, though you know it is not. It is your hearing that is dimming, your body that is losing the ability to register the storm's full force. The danger is no less, only your awareness of it. Time dissolves further. You no longer mark hours by the fire's collapse or the changing light at the windows. Both are irrelevant. The fire will die regardless. The windows are buried regardless. You mark time now by the rhythm of your own body, the length between coughs, the spacing of your shallow breaths, the heaviness of your eyelids before they close again. Each interval grows longer, slower, until you begin to wonder whether your body is spacing them deliberately, stretching out the final moments to make them last. Dream and waking twist into one. You imagine voices, soft ones, calling faintly from beyond the door. You think you hear footsteps crunching through snow, laughter echoing from children in the street, the faint strike of hooves on cobblestone. None of it can be real, yet it is vivid enough to make your chest ache with longing. You remember the bustle of an ordinary morning, the chatter of neighbours, the cries of vendors, and it seems more like dream than memory. The life you once lived has already been erased by the storm, and now even the memory of it fades. You try once half-heartedly to rise from the blankets, to straighten your back and prove you're still able. Your body resists completely. Your arms tremble, your legs buckle, your head swims until black spots flicker across your vision. You collapse back into the damp fabric, heart racing from the effort. The attempt proves what you already suspected. You will not rise again. The weight of the blankets is too much, the weakness in your limbs too final. You let your head sink deeper into the folds, eyes closing. The smoke stings less now, not because it's cleared, but because your body no longer has the strength to resist. Your chest rises shallowly, falters, rises once more, then pauses too long before the next breath comes. The rhythm weakens further, each inhale more ragged, each exhale more fragile, until at last the cycle breaks altogether. Your lips part slightly, but no air enters. The stillness inside you mirrors the silence of the buried street outside. The storm howls against the walls, the fire gutters, and you lie motionless beneath the blankets. Your body trembles once more, then slackens, every muscle surrendering at last. The final breath leaves you, faint and unremarkable, and there is no next one to follow. The house is quiet now, save for the storm's distant roar. You have died alone and unseen, sealed inside your own home. Days later, the storm finally loosens its grip. The wind falls quiet, the snow ceases its endless descent, and what remains is a city unrecognizable. The streets lie buried beneath mountains of white, canyons cut between drifts that rise higher than the roofs. Telegraph poles lean like broken bones, wires sagging lifeless between them. Carriages stand half swallowed, their horses frozen where they fell, outlines softened by the ice. The silence is immense, deeper than the noise that preceded it, as though the storm carried sound itself away. Neighbours emerge cautiously, prying their doors open against the weight that pinned them shut. They stumble into narrow trenches, blinking at the pale light, voices hushed in disbelief at what the city has become. Steps are dug with shovels, then tunnels carved, neighbours calling to one another across the white abysses that used to be streets. The work is slow, and the discoveries grim. A gloved hand protruding from a mound, a boot caught in a drift, a face frozen pale just outside a doorway. Bodies are pulled into the open, stiffened in the poses of struggle, some no more than a few steps from their own homes. The city counts its dead in silence. Some are sailors washed ashore, their vessels smashed in the harbour. Some are children, buried before they reach their doors. Others lie in corners and alleys, hidden until the digging uncovers them. Every street has its share. The progress of the age, the telegraphs, the trains, the streetcars, has not saved anyone. In the end, the storm erased all of it, leaving only fragile bodies stilled by cold. When the shovels reach your street, voices echo through the trench as neighbours pass news along. They call names, some answered faintly from windows above, others met with nothing but silence. The The diggers move house by house, carving paths, pulling open doors heavy with snow. In one of them, they find you. Beneath damp blankets, in the dim light of a room sealed tight, your body lies motionless. The fire is long since dead, the air thick with the stale scent of smoke. Your eyes are closed, your skin pale, your chest still. There is no sign of struggle anymore, only the quiet slackness that follows when all strength is gone. They pull you out gently, though without ceremony. Your body is stiff, heavy with ice, limbs frozen into the posture you last held. They carry you into the trench and set you aside with the others. Another figure lost to the storm. There is no headline waiting to bear your name, no note to mark your passing. To the city, you are one among hundreds, forgotten as soon as you're counted. The storm leaves behind silence more complete than before. Snow muffles the sound of shovels, absorbs the shuffle of boots, swallows the voices of those who mourn. It is as if the blizzard has carried memory itself away, burying not only streets and buildings, but the lives that once filled them. You are not remembered, not even by those who pull you from your sealed house. You are recorded as a body found, and then the digging continues. And that brings us to the end of tonight's story. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with another forgotten corner of history you'd like explored next. If you'd like early access to more of these quiet descents into forgotten history, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps more people find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S. and Rich Davis. Sleep well.